The morning sun spilled across the skyline of Chicago, painting the tall glass towers in shades of honeyed gold. The streets below buzzed with energy horns honking, hurried footsteps, the faint aroma of roasted coffee beans drifting from cafes tucked on every corner. For most people, it was just another Monday. For Rose Carter, however, the day had already begun, with a heaviness she couldn't quite explain. Inside the towering headquarters of Harrison & Cole Financial Group, the office hummed with the faint clicking of keyboards and the low murmur of early conversations. Rose had arrived before most of her colleagues, a habit she had cultivated over the years. She preferred the quiet hours, when the office lights were still dim, and the only sound was the comforting clink of her teaspoon stirring coffee. She sat in the pantry lounge tucked into the corner of the modern space, with its sleek marble counters and high stools. Her gaze was fixed on the liquid swirl inside her mug, her thoughts miles away. The aroma of dark roast coffee rose to her senses, but she hardly noticed. Well, well, Miss Carter already lost in your thoughts at 8 in the morning. The teasing voice snapped her back. She looked up to see Aurora Johnson, her best friend and closest confidant at the firm, sliding into the seat beside her. Aurora was all energy, her red curls bouncing her laughter loud enough to make heads turn. She set her lunch container on the table and unwrapped it with a grin. Rose sighed softly. "It's not that deep, Aurora. Just thinking about the mountain of reports waiting for me." Aurora arched a brow, biting into her sandwich with exaggerated slowness. "Reports? Are you sure that's what's on your mind? Or is there someone else?" Rose frowned. "What do you mean?" Leaning closer, Aurora lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Word around accounting is, our dear boss Julian Harrison has a little crush on you." Rose nearly dropped her coffee. Her heart gave a startled leap. "What? That's ridiculous! Where did you hear that nonsense?" Aurora smirked. "Oh, it's not nonsense. I heard it straight from Maris in HR. She swears she caught Julian looking at you during Friday's meeting. Not just looking staring like the world disappeared and only you existed." Rose's cheeks flushed a betraying shade of pink. She tried to hide behind her mug. "Aurora, stop. That's just gossip. People love making up stories in this office." But Aurora was relentless. "Oh, come on. Even I've noticed it. Whenever you walk past his office, he stops typing. He literally freezes. You can't tell me you haven't seen it." Rose pressed her lips together. She had noticed. A few times, in fact. Julian's gaze lingered his pen, halting mid-sentence, the faint curve of a smile that seemed meant for her alone. But she had dismissed it, chalking it up to a coincidence. "You're imagining things," she muttered more to herself than to Aurora. Coincidence happens once, Aurora teased. Twice is fate. 3 times. Honey, that's destiny knocking on your door. Rose covered her mouth to stifle a laugh. "You're ridiculous. I'm not entertaining this conversation." Aurora rolled her eyes dramatically. "Why not? He's young, rich, ridiculously handsome, and single. You, my darling, are gorgeous, intelligent, and grounded. You're the kind of woman men like him don't just notice, they fall for." "Grounded?" Rose repeated, trying not to laugh. "That's just your polite way of saying I'm boring." Aurora grinned. "Boring? Please. You're the only person in this company who doesn't spray herself in perfume clouds to walk past Julian's office. And guess what? That's why you stand out. He doesn't want a show. He wants something real. And that's you." Rose shook her head, but a tiny involuntary smile tugged at her lips. Her friend's words warmed her, though she hated to admit it. Aurora leaned back smugly. "And don't forget last week. You came late to the boardroom meeting, remember? He could have scolded you in front of everyone. But instead he smiled and said, 'Well, at least you were worth the wait.'" Rose's breath caught. She remembered it vividly. The way his eyes had softened, the playful lilt in his voice. Her heart had fluttered then, though she had buried the feeling quickly. That was nothing, she insisted. That was everything, Aurora countered. Face it, Rose. He likes you. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Rose's expression sobered. Nothing. He's my boss. Even if he feels something, it doesn't matter. Boundaries exist for a reason. Aurora shrugged. Rules are made to be broken. And besides, there's no company policy against dating the CEO. People would think I'm using him to climb the ladder, Rose said quietly. And you know that's the last thing I'd ever do. Aurora's tone softened. She reached across the table and squeezed Rose's hand. I know you, Rose. You're not that kind of woman. If Julian sees you as I think he does, it's because of who you are, not what he can get from you. Don't be so quick to doubt yourself. For a long moment, Rose was silent. She let her gaze drop to her coffee again. Her heart tangled between reason and something softer, more dangerous. A memory surfaced, Julian standing across the boardroom, eyes locked with hers, his smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, as if it was a secret only they shared. Her lips parted, but no words came. Aurora leaned in, her tone suddenly serious. Listen to your heart, Rose. Sometimes it knows the truth before your head catches up. Rose chuckled nervously, brushing off the advice. You sound like a bad fortune cookie. Aurora pinched her arm, making her yelp. I'm serious. Don't ignore the signs. Opportunities like this don't come around twice. Before Rose could reply, polished shoes clicked against the floor. The pantry door swung open, and in walked Julian Harrison himself. Tall, sharp suit in midnight black, hair perfectly combed back, highlighting his striking blue eyes. His presence filled the room instantly, commanding attention without effort. Aurora's eyes went wide. She leaned across the table, whispering, Good luck, girl. Rose's pulse quickened. She straightened in her seat, suddenly hyper-aware of every move she made. Julian's gaze immediately found her, and a slow smile curved his lips. Rose, he said, his voice smooth, rich, like aged whiskey. Her breath hitched. Yes, sir. Please join me in the conference room for a moment. I want to go over the quarterly reports with you. Aurora shot her a knowing look, as if to say, Reports, huh? Rose swallowed hard, nodding quickly. Of course, Mr. Harrison. As she stood, her hands trembled around the folders she clutched. She followed Julian out of the pantry, aware of every curious glance from her colleagues. Her heels clicked on the polished floor, the sound echoing louder than usual in her ears. The conference room was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking view of the Chicago skyline. Julian closed the door behind them, the click of the lock echoing in the silence. Please. He gestured to a chair. Sit. Rose obeyed, her heart hammering. He sat across from her, sliding a document onto the table, but his eyes lingered on her longer than they should have. His gaze studied her face, her composure, the nervous way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You have a gift, Rose, he said suddenly. She blinked. I'm sorry. Your reports. They're cleaner and more precise than anyone else's in this office. It's rare to see that kind of dedication these days. Heat crept up her neck. Thank you, sir. I just do my best. Julian leaned back in his chair, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. And that's precisely what makes you different. For a moment, the air thickened heavy with an unspoken tension. Rose lowered her gaze, unsure what to do with the fluttering in her chest. Then, just as suddenly, Julian shifted gears. Are you free for lunch today? Her eyes shot up. Lunch. Yes, he said casually, though his eyes gleamed with something more profound. I want to discuss your workload further. At the restaurant across the river. My treat. Rose's lips parted, words failing her. She could barely think past the thundering of her heartbeat. Lunch alone. With him. I suppose I'm free, she murmured. Good. He stood adjusting his cufflinks with practiced ease. I'll see you in the lobby at 12 sharp. With that, he left the room. Rose staring after him, her mind spinning. When she finally returned to her desk, Aurora pounced immediately. Well, what did he say? Rose clutched her folder, trying to appear nonchalant. He just wanted to go over reports. Aurora narrowed her eyes, and Rose hesitated, then whispered, He invited me to lunch. Aurora's eyes widened. Lunch. Just the two of you. Rose nodded almost imperceptibly. Aurora squealed, covering her mouth. Girl, this is it. This is the beginning of something big. Rose shook her head quickly. No, it's work. He said he wants to discuss my workload. Aurora smirked knowingly. Work, huh? We'll see. But Rose wasn't so sure. Her heart was a battlefield logic screaming at her to stay cautious, while something softer whispered that maybe, just maybe, Aurora was right. The clock struck 12, and Rose Carter stood in the glass lobby of Harrison & Cole Financial Group, her palms damp, despite her best efforts to steady them. The polished marble floor reflected the high ceilings above, where a chandelier caught the light and scattered it like crystal shards. People streamed in and out, interns clutching documents, analysts glued to their phones, partners breezing through with the kind of arrogance only money could buy. And then there was her. Just Rose. The girl from the modest apartment on the south side, the one who still cooked ramen on nights the paycheck didn't stretch far enough, the one who had promised herself never to get caught up in dreams too big for her to hold. Yet here she was, waiting for Julian Harrison, the CEO, the billionaire with a reputation for charm and ruthless intelligence, and for him to take her to lunch. This is work, she reminded herself. Nothing more. A professional courtesy. An appreciation for my diligence. Her reflection in the mirrored elevator doors looked back at her skeptically. Even she didn't buy it. The doors parted, and there he was. Julian moved with a grace that didn't seem rehearsed yet. Every step felt deliberate. The tailored navy suit hugged his tall frame perfectly. His tie a subtle burgundy that added just enough warmth to soften the steel of his blue eyes. When those eyes landed on Rose, they lit with a flicker of something that made her stomach flip. Right on time, he said, his voice smooth, carrying that faint rasp that always made her think of late-night jazz bars. Rose swallowed. You asked me to be punctual, sir. Julian, he corrected gently, leaning in just enough that only she could hear, at least when we're outside the office. Her pulse stumbled. She nodded, unable to summon a witty reply. He gestured toward the revolving doors, his hand resting lightly on her back as he guided her out. The touch was polite, barely there yet. It sent an uninvited shiver down her spine. Outside, the city roared to life. Taxis honked, tourists pointed up at skyscrapers, and the wind carried the scent of the river mixed with hot pretzels from a vendor nearby. Julian's black Mercedes waited at the curb, sleek and gleaming like something plucked from a commercial. A driver in a crisp suit opened the door. Rose hesitated. She had never sat in the back seat of a car like this. For a brief second, she considered bolting back inside, claiming she had too much work. But Julian was already watching her, his smile patient, but knowing like a man accustomed to winning small battles without raising a weapon. She slid inside. The leather smelled expensive, rich, and clean. Chicago's skyline blurred past as they drove, the tall towers fading into quieter streets lined with boutiques and art galleries. Rose kept her hands neatly folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the passing world outside. Julian broke the silence first. How long have you been with the firm? 3 years, she replied, glancing at him briefly. I started as an assistant and worked my way into data analysis. And in those 3 years, Julian said, his tone softening, you've made yourself indispensable. She blinked. I don't know about that. I do. He leaned back, studying her. I notice things, Rose. You don't complain about the late nights. The way your reports are cleaner than anyone else's. The way you handle pressure with quiet strength. That kind of dedication doesn't go unnoticed. Her throat tightened. She wasn't used to compliments, at least not from men like him. From men at all, really. Thank you, she said softly. The corner of his mouth curved. You're welcome. The car pulled to a stop in front of a restaurant on the Chicago Riverwalk. All glass walls and sleek architecture perched with a view of the water glittering under the afternoon sun. Inside, the host led them to a private table by the window. The place hummed with quiet elegance, the clink of wine glasses, the low murmur of conversation, the faint strains of a piano drifting from somewhere unseen. Julian held Rose's chair before seating himself across from her. She murmured a thank you, trying not to focus on the intimacy of such an old-fashioned gesture. Menus were placed before them, but Julian hardly glanced at his. He seemed far more interested in watching her, and Rose suddenly found herself hyper-aware of every move she made, how she tucked her braids behind her ear, how she smoothed her blouse, how she fiddled with the edge of the napkin. So, he said, voice warm, tell me about yourself. Rose froze. What do you mean, beyond the spreadsheets and reports? Who is Rose Carter? She gave a nervous laugh. Not much to tell. I work. I go home. I read sometimes. Read what he pressed gently. Novels. She admitted, mostly romance, sometimes thrillers. Julian's eyes sparked with amusement. Romance. I wouldn't have guessed. Why not? Because you carry yourself like someone who doesn't believe in it. She tilted her head. And what makes you so sure I don't? He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. Instinct. You're guarded. You've built walls. Which tells me you've learned not to expect too much from people. The words pierced closer to the truth than she liked. She shifted in her seat. I don't like handing out pieces of myself to people who don't deserve them. Julian's smile widened, slow and appreciative. Smart. But what if someone did deserve it? Rose's chest tightened. She looked down at the menu, pretending to study it, though the words blurred together. The waiter arrived, breaking the moment. Orders were placed. Julian was confident in choosing the chef's recommendation. Rose was hesitant, and finally settled on salmon. Once the waiter departed, silence lingered. Julian filled it with stories, snippets of business trips to New York and San Francisco, anecdotes about foreign investors, even a light joke about a disastrous dinner in Tokyo. He told them with effortless charisma, his voice weaving pictures vivid enough to distract her from her nerves. And yet, beneath it all, something in Rose whispered caution. She watched him as he spoke, the way he gestured, and his eyes gleamed. He was magnetic, yes, but he was also polished, calculated. Every smile felt crafted, every word delivered like a performance. It was almost too perfect. Am I boring you? He asked, suddenly catching her gaze. Rose startled. No, not at all. I was just... She hesitated, thinking. About... She fumbled for an excuse. Work. Julian chuckled, low and smooth. Rose, you don't have to think about work with me. Not right now. She gave a tight smile. Old habits die hard. Lunch arrived, plates arranged like artwork. They ate, conversation continuing in lighter tones. Aurora's endless office gossip. Rose's childhood summers in Atlanta. Julian's favorite hidden jazz clubs in the city. And yet beneath the surface, the tension simmered. At one point, Julian leaned back studying her. "You know I don't usually do this." Rose looked up. "Do at lunch with employees. Conversations beyond numbers. It's rare." Her heart stuttered. "Why me then?" Julian's gaze lingered. "Because you're not like the others." For a moment, she let herself believe him. Let herself feel the warmth in his tone, the sincerity in his eyes. But the truth waited across the river in the shadows of the city's towering skyline. A truth she couldn't see yet, that to Julian, this was more than lunch, more than interest. This was a game. And to him, she was already playing. The week after that lunch on the Riverwalk unfolded like a dream Rose wasn't sure she wanted to wake from. Every morning there was a new detail. A small paper cup of cappuccino was waiting on her desk, her name scribbled neatly on the lid. A pause in the hallway when Julian's gaze lingered just a beat too long, a smile curving like a secret only she was meant to know. A question dropped casually. "Did you sleep well? Did you get home safely?" As though her life outside the office was suddenly his to wonder about. To everyone else in the company, he was the unreachable figure at the top of the hierarchy, his name etched in gold on the building's glass facade. But to Rose, he had begun to feel closer, attentive, dangerously human. Aurora, of course, was relentless. By Wednesday, she had cornered Rose in the break room with wide eyes and an accusing finger. "Spill. Now. What exactly is happening between you and Mr. Tall, Dark, and Rich?" Rose pressed her lips together, cradling her mug like a shield. "Nothing is happening." "Nothing," Aurora scoffed. "You had lunch at Le Jardin. Do you know how hard it is to get a table there without selling a kidney? And don't you dare tell me he invited you to talk about pivot tables." Rose groaned. "Aurora." Her friend grinned wickedly. "You've got the glow. That soft, floaty look like you just stepped out of a Hallmark movie." Rose turned toward the window, willing her cheeks not to burn. "It's not like that." "Uh-huh." Aurora smirked. "Then why are you smiling right now?" Rose hadn't realized she was. She quickly covered it with a sip of coffee. But deep down she couldn't deny it. Something about Julian's attention made her feel seen. Not as the overworked analyst hidden behind spreadsheets, not as the girl who still carried childhood scars of being overlooked. With him, she felt like the center of a spotlight she had never dared step into. And yet, there were moments, small and fleeting, that unsettled her. His compliments often sounded too rehearsed, perfectly timed to land when her guard was down. Or how he seemed to know things she hadn't told him, her favorite brand of coffee, the book she had borrowed from the office library. Coincidence, perhaps, but the thought nibbled at her peace of mind. It was Thursday evening when she met Jasper for the first time. The office had thinned out the once bustling floor, now quiet, except for the distant hum of a vacuum cleaner. Rose gathered her things, tucking her laptop into her bag, when she noticed someone leaning against the lobby's glass wall. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed casually in a dark polo and jeans. His hair was tousled in that artfully careless way, his jaw lined with a scruff that seemed to belong in a GQ spread. He wasn't the kind of man you mistook for a stranger, yet she had never seen him in the building before. He straightened when she passed his smile easy. "Excuse me." "Rose, right?" Her steps faltered. "Yes." "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you." He extended a hand. "I'm Jasper Hale, a friend of Julian's." Rose hesitated, eyeing the hand before shaking it lightly. His grip was firm, warm, and confident without being overbearing. "Oh," she said softly. "You know, Mr. Harrison." Jasper chuckled. "You mean Julian. Yeah, we've known each other since college. Long enough to have seen each other at our worst." Something flickered in his tone, a subtle edge beneath the humor. But before Rose could place it, he was smiling again. Jasper added that he talks about you, studying her reaction. Rose blinked. He does. Quite a lot, actually. Jasper tilted his head, amusement glinting in his eyes. Honestly, you're more striking in person than in his stories. Heat prickled at her skin. She quickly looked away, her heart fumbling for composure. That's kind of you. He didn't press. Instead, he fell into step beside her as she exited the building. The evening air was cool, the city buzzing with its usual symphony of honking cars and distant music spilling from bars. So Jasper said casually, "What's it like working with him?" Rose glanced at him, sensing more in the question than curiosity. He's intense, demanding, but fair. Jasper's smile was faint, almost ironic. Fair. Interesting choice of words. She frowned. What do you mean, nothing? He waved it off. Just be careful. He hailed a cab with a whistle before she could ask what he meant. Opening the door, he gave her one last look, steady, unreadable. See you around, Rose. And then he was gone, swallowed by the city lights. Rose lay awake in her small apartment that night, staring at the ceiling. Be careful. 2 words, simple enough, yet they gnawed at her. Why would Julian's friend warn her? Why approach her at all? And why did his tone feel less like a suggestion and more like a plea? She turned onto her side, hugging her pillow tighter. Logic told her to dismiss it, but her heart, the same heart that skipped when Julian looked at her, that melted under his compliments, beat faster for a different reason now. In Jasper's eyes, she had seen something Julian had never shown her. A flicker of sincerity. A concern that didn't feel rehearsed. The next day, Julian was waiting for her in the lobby. Good morning, Rose. His smile was warm, disarming. I want to steal a moment before the day consumes us. Rose blinked at him, still shaken by last night's encounter. Of course, Mr. Julian. He offered her a cappuccino perfectly made, the foam shaped into a delicate heart. Thought you might need this, he said smoothly. Her lips curved despite herself. Thank you. But Jasper's words echoed in her mind as she took the cup. Be careful. Julian walked her to the elevator, chatting easily about an upcoming project, his tone light yet tinged with authority. He seemed flawless, and every move was calibrated to impress. And yet behind the charm, she felt the shadow of something else, a performance. Later that afternoon, Rose stopped by the conference room to drop off a file. The door was ajar. Inside, Julian stood with his back to her phone pressed to his ear. She meant to leave quietly, but his words froze her in place. Yeah, he said, voice lower, colder than she'd ever heard. Level 1's done. She's hooked. Rose's breath caught. A pause. Then Julian laughed softly. Don't worry. This will be easy. She's precisely the type, sweet, earnest, eager to believe piece of cake. Her heart pounded. Before she could hear more, the floor creaked beneath her feet. Julian turned swiftly, his face snapping into its usual polished smile. Rose? He said smoothly, as if nothing had happened. Did you need something? She forced her voice steady. Just dropping off the quarterly reports. Perfect. Thank you. His gaze lingered, searching before softening. You look lovely today, by the way. Rose managed a polite smile before retreating, her pulse thundering in her ears. The cappuccino still sat untouched in her desk drawer, the heart in the foam slowly collapsing. That night, as she left the office, the city buzzing with Friday night energy, Rose spotted a familiar figure leaning casually against a lamppost. Jasper. This time he didn't smile. His expression was serious, his eyes fixed on her with a weight that tightened her chest. Ready to listen now, he asked quietly. And though she didn't know why, Rose felt that stepping closer to him might change everything. Everything. The weekend crept in like a thief with more questions than answers. Rose had spent Saturday pretending everything was normal: laundry tumbling in the machine, grocery bags cutting into her palms, the hum of her small South Side apartment filling the silence. But nothing was normal. Not since she had overheard Julian's voice through that half-open door. "Level 1's done. She's hooked." The words looped through her mind like a broken record, scratching at her trust. Every time she tried to convince herself, she had misheard the memory of his laughter, replayed smooth and confident, too self-assured to be innocent. And then there was Jasper, the stranger who wasn't quite a stranger, the man with the steady gaze that unsettled her more than Julian's charm ever did. His question haunted her almost as much as Julian's phone call. Ready to listen now. By Sunday night, Rose had concluded that she couldn't avoid either man. Not yet. She needed answers, and answers lived in the space between their words. When she walked into the office on Monday, Julian was waiting. As though the universe had staged it, he stood near the lobby's tall windows, sunlight pouring over him like he had been cut from glass and polished for display. His suit was charcoal gray today, crisp, precise, paired with a silk tie, the color of midnight. In his hand, a single white tulip. "For you," he said, holding it out with a smile that could have graced magazine covers. Rose blinked at the flower. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," Julian replied smoothly. "Sometimes appreciation doesn't need a reason." The tulip's petals were pure, unblemished, soft against her fingertips as she accepted it. But in her chest, something tightened. Appreciation. It should have felt flattering, romantic. Instead, it felt staged, a prop in a play she hadn't auditioned for. Still, she smiled faintly, aware of eyes watching from nearby desks. She didn't want gossip to spiral faster than it already had. Julian's gaze lingered, searching her face for a reaction. Then he leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. "Dinner tonight. There's a place in River North you'd love. Quiet. Just us." Her throat tightened. "I'll think about it." "Good." His smile sharpened enough to make her wonder if he'd expected no other answer. By mid-morning, Aurora had dragged her into the copy room, her expression a cocktail of glee and suspicion. "A tulip? Seriously? That man is laying it on thick." Rose rolled her eyes, setting the flower gently on a counter. "Aurora, don't know what? Don't notice that you're practically starring in an office rom-com. He's courting you, Rose. The CEO doesn't hand out flowers just to anyone." Rose sighed, rubbing her temples. "It isn't very easy." Aurora tilted her head, her voice softening. "Complicated, or you don't trust it?" The question struck too close to home. Rose swallowed, choosing silence over confession. Aurora studied her for a beat longer, then grinned. "Well, if you're not interested, pass him my way. I could use a tulip or two." Rose laughed, despite herself, the tension cracking just slightly. But when Aurora left, the smile faded quickly. At noon, Rose slipped outside for fresh air. The city was alive with its weekday symphony, horns blaring, heels clicking on pavement, the chatter of people darting between coffee shops. She leaned against a railing overlooking the Chicago River, the tulip in her bag like a silent witness. "Beautiful view," a voice said behind her. She turned. Jasper stood a few feet away, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. Unlike Julian, he didn't gleam like a polished diamond. His clothes were simple dark jeans, a leather jacket that had seen better days, but on him, it worked. He looked real, solid. "What are you doing here?" she asked, wary. "Passing through," he said casually, though his eyes told her otherwise. Thought I'd check in. See how you're doing. Rose crossed her arms. Why? Because Jasper said simply that I don't like seeing people enter traps. Her pulse quickened. What kind of trap? He didn't answer right away. His gaze flicked toward the water, the current glinting beneath the midday sun. You already know something's off. Otherwise you wouldn't be standing here avoiding him. Rose bristled. I'm not avoiding anyone. Then why does your voice shake when you say that? The words hit harder than she expected. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came. Instead, she returned to the river, gripping the railing until the metal dug into her palms. I overheard him. She admitted finally, her voice low on the phone. He said things that didn't sound right. But I don't know what they mean. Jasper's jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to tell her everything. But instead, he said, Trust your instincts, Rose. They're sharper than you think. She glanced at him, searching his face. Why do you care? His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. Because you don't deserve what's coming. The weight of his words pressed against her chest, leaving her breathless. Before she could ask more, he stepped back, offering a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. Be careful, Rose. And just like that, he was gone again, swallowed by the crowd. Rose sat across from Julian at an upscale restaurant in River North that evening. Candlelight flickered between them, painting his features in soft gold. He was effortless as always, guiding conversation with charm, weaving compliments into the rhythm like silk threads. You have a way of making any room brighter, he said at one point, his gaze lingering. Rose forced a smile, but her thoughts replayed Jasper's words. You don't deserve what's coming. She studied Julian carefully, the way he leaned forward, the precision of his laughter, the way his compliments seemed rehearsed. Was it her imagination, or did he enjoy impressing her more than the sincerity of connection? When the waiter poured wine, Julian raised his glass to possibilities. Rose hesitated, then clinked hers lightly against his. But as the crystal rang out, she couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't toasting her. He was toasting the game. Later, as his car rolled through the glittering streets, Julian's voice softened. You're quiet tonight, he said. Rose glanced out the window. Just tired. He reached for her hand, his touch warm, deliberate. I hope you can trust me. The words almost made her laugh, not because they were funny, but because they felt perfectly timed, as if scripted to arrive when she needed reassurance. She withdrew her hand gently. I should get home. Julian studied her, a flicker of something displeasure, perhaps crossing his face before he masked it with another smile. Of course. Rest well, Rose. As she exited the car, the night air hit her lungs like truth. She didn't know who to believe. But she knew one thing. Trust was no longer something she could give lightly. Rose set the tulip in a glass of water in her apartment, watching as it leaned toward the lamplight. It was beautiful, perfect, fragile, much like the attention Julian lavished on her. And as she stared at it, Jasper's voice whispered through her memory again. Trust your instincts. For the first time, she admitted to herself she was afraid, not being unwanted, but of being wanted for all the wrong reasons. The week opened like any other meetings, reports, the steady hum of printers spitting out numbers no one wanted to read. On the surface, Rose Carter's life was intact, calm even. But beneath the polished floors of Harrison and Cole, she carried a storm no one else could see. Julian had been relentless. Each day came with another gesture, coffee appearing on her desk, handwritten notes folded into file folders, small jokes whispered just for her during long board meetings. He was careful, calculated, and everyone noticed. Girl, you've officially been upgraded, Aurora whispered one afternoon as they sat in the break room. From hardworking analyst to CEO's mysterious favorite. You're one tulip away from a Hallmark movie ending. Rose forced a smile. She wanted to believe it. She tried to lean into the idea that maybe she'd stumbled into something rare, that maybe Julian Harrison wasn't just a man from a different world, but someone who had chosen her of all people. But the words she had overheard still clung to her like smoke. Level 1's done. She's hooked. Every time Julian looked at her, every compliment, every smile, it all carried a faint echo of rehearsal. On Thursday, Julian appeared at her desk. "Rose," he said, his voice smooth enough to belong to a stage actor. "Dinner tonight. My place." The words hit like a stone dropping into water. She looked up slowly. "Your place." He smiled, leaning on the edge of her desk with casual elegance. "Yes. I want to cook for you. Something simple. Just the two of us away from curious eyes." Aurora, pretending to sort papers at the next cubicle, mouthed a silent yes. Rose's pulse skittered. Every instinct screamed caution, but she nodded anyway. "All right." Julian's smile widened, triumphant. "Perfect. I'll send a car." As he walked away, Aurora swooped in, practically vibrating. "His place, girl. Do you know what that means? This is next level serious." Rose pressed a hand to her forehead, or next level something else. Aurora blinked. "What do you mean?" Rose shook her head, unwilling to explain. Some doubts were too fragile to survive the light. That evening, Rose left the office early, needing space to breathe before whatever dinner at Julian's place would entail. She wandered toward the Riverwalk, the city glowing in early twilight. And there he was again. Jasper leaned against the railing, as if he'd been waiting all along. He wasn't dressed like Julian, no tailored suit, no expensive tie. Just a simple jacket, dark eyes catching the last of the fading sun. "You look like someone walking into trouble," he said, his voice even. Rose stiffened. "What do you want, Jasper?" "Honesty," he said. "Something I know you're not getting from Julian." Her chest tightened. "You don't know him." "I know him better than anyone," Jasper replied quietly. "And that's precisely why I'm here." She folded her arms. "You keep showing up with warnings, but never answer. Why should I believe you?" For a moment, Jasper studied her as though weighing whether she was ready. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped a few times, and held it out. "Because of this." Rose hesitated before taking it. On the screen was an audio file. She pressed play, and her stomach dropped. Julian's voice is unmistakable. Smooth, confident. "Mission accomplished. She's already halfway in. Easiest bet I've ever made." Rose's breath caught. The blood drained from her face. The recording continued, laughter in the background. Male voices are cheering him on. "You make her feel like the only one, then drop her. That's the game." Her fingers shook as she stopped the playback. She shoved the phone back at Jasper. "No, that's not real. You could have faked it." Jasper's gaze didn't waver. "I wish I had." She stumbled back a step, her heart hammering. "He wouldn't. Julian wouldn't do that." "You heard it yourself," Jasper said. His voice was steady, but there was something pained beneath it, as though he hated being right. "It's not just you. There have been others. He picks women who seem untouchable, women who don't fall easily, and that's the thrill for him. The conquest." Rose shook her head, tears burning at the edges of her vision. "No. He's kind. He's calculated." Jasper finished for her every word. "Every gesture is designed to pull you in." Her throat closed. She turned away, gripping the railing so hard her knuckles whitened. "You don't know what it's like," she whispered, "to finally feel like someone sees you, to feel Chosen. Jasper's voice softened. I do know. That's why I'm standing here. Because he's not seeing you, Rose. He's seeing a bet. The silence that followed was unbearable. The city roared around them. Horns, footsteps, laughter, but only a hollow ache in her chest. Finally, she whispered, Why are you telling me this? Jasper hesitated. Then because I can't watch him break you. Not when I... He stopped himself, shaking his head. Not when you deserve better. Her breath trembled. She wanted to press him to demand what he meant, but she couldn't. Not when her entire world felt like it was cracking in two. That night, she went anyway. Because denial is stubborn, her heart wasn't ready to let go of the dream. Julian's apartment was exactly what she expected: glass walls overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline, art pieces that probably cost more than her yearly salary, every surface immaculate. He greeted her with a smile. Wine already opened, the scent of something rich and savory filling the space. Welcome, he said warmly, kissing her hand like a practiced gentleman. Rose forced a smile, but Jasper's recording replayed in her mind with every word Julian spoke. Mission accomplished. Easiest bet I've ever made. Over dinner, Julian was perfect. Too perfect. His stories flowed, his laughter easy, his eyes warm whenever they landed on her. And yet, every compliment made her flinch inside. Every smile felt like part of the script. At one point, he reached across the table, brushing his fingers against hers. You know, Rose, I don't let many people this close. Her chest constricted. The line was beautiful, convincing. But she couldn't shake the question. Was it truth? Or just another line he'd perfected in 100 rehearsals before her? Later, when she finally returned home, she dropped the tulip he'd given her that morning into the trash. Her apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in. She sat on the edge of her bed, pulling her knees to her chest, and let the tears come. Because she wanted to believe Julian. She wanted the fantasy, the rich, magnetic man who had chosen her out of everyone. She tried to accept Aurora's fairy tale version of their story. But in the shadows of her mind, Jasper's recording played repeatedly, each word another fracture in the glass of her heart. She's already halfway in. Easiest bet I've ever made. And as the night stretched on, Rose realized the cruelest truth of all. She didn't know who to believe anymore. The morning after dinner at Julian's apartment, Rose woke with the taste of wine still on her tongue and a hollow ache in her chest. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to gather the fragments of herself. On the surface, everything had been perfect. The food, the wine, the view of the city shimmering like a necklace of diamonds against the night sky. Julian laughed at her jokes, touched her hand, and spoke as though she were the only person who mattered. It should have been everything she'd once dreamed of. And yet, every word he spoke had been shadowed by the recording Jasper had played for her. Mission accomplished. Easiest bet I've ever made. It was like kissing someone while hearing another man's voice in your head. She could smile at Julian, nod at his compliments, but beneath it all, the memory of that cold laughter coiled like smoke, staining everything. Rose had convinced herself she could function when she reached the office. Smile at Aurora. Sort the reports. Pretend the ground beneath her wasn't splitting. But Julian was waiting. Good morning, he said warmly, holding out a cappuccino as though nothing in the world was amiss. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing his. He smiled, but something in her tightened. She couldn't drink it. Not anymore. Aurora appeared behind her, eyes dancing. If this man keeps bringing you coffee, I will make him my barista. What's the special occasion today? Rose forced a smile. Being thoughtful, I guess. Aurora leaned in, whispering, Girl, this is not thoughtful. This is obsessed. But when she looked at Julian again, Rose saw a performance. That evening, Rose didn't go home. She couldn't face her apartment. the silence the echo of her thoughts. Instead, she walked the city streets aimlessly, weaving through crowds that didn't know her name. Neon lights blurred conversations drifted by, and the scent of roasted peanuts mixed with car exhaust. Eventually, she ended up on a quiet bench near Millennium Park, the cold biting her coat. And that's where Jasper found her. He didn't announce himself this time. He sat down beside her silent, his presence steady, like a weight she hadn't realized she needed. For a long while they didn't speak. The world moved around them, laughter, footsteps, a busker's violin, but between them, only silence. Finally, Rose whispered, "Why did you show me that recording?" Jasper turned his head slightly, "Because you deserved the truth." Her throat ached. "You knew it would break me. I knew it would hurt," he admitted. "But being broken by lies hurts worse." Her eyes burned. "I don't know what to believe anymore. He looks at me like I matter. He says things that feel real. And then I hear his voice saying, 'I'm a bet, Jasper.'" The word splintered as it left her lips. Jasper's jaw tightened. That's what he does. He makes you feel chosen, so it hurts more when he pulls it away. It's never about love for him. It's about power. Winning. Rose pressed her hands over her face, the tears finally spilling. "I was so stupid. I should have known, don't." His voice was firm, cutting through her spiral. "Don't blame yourself for trusting someone who pretended well. Trusting isn't stupidity, Rose. It's humanity." She lowered her hands, meeting his gaze. His eyes were steady, unflinching, carrying something she hadn't let herself notice before, a quiet ache, as if her pain was his own. The night deepened, the air colder, their breaths visible in small clouds. Rose hugged herself, shivering, not just from the wind. "I don't know how to move forward," she admitted. "Every time he smiles, I feel weak. Every time I think of what you showed me, I feel sick. I don't know which part of me is stronger." Jasper leaned back, his hands clasped loosely in his lap. "You don't have to decide tonight. You don't even have to choose tomorrow. But don't ignore what you've heard. That voice on the recording. That wasn't love. That was arrogance." Rose closed her eyes, the tears still wet on her cheeks. "And you? Why are you helping me? You could have stayed quiet." For a moment, Jasper didn't answer. Then he exhaled slowly. "Because I can't stand watching him do this again. And because—" He paused as though weighing whether to cross an invisible line. "Because I care about you." Her chest tightened. The words hung between them, heavy, undeniable. She wanted to reject them, saying it was too soon or impossible. But instead she whispered, "Why me?" Jasper's lips curved in the faintest, saddest smile. "Because you're not pretending. You're real. And that's rarer than you think." The following days blurred. Rose went through motions, meetings, reports, forced smiles at Aurora's relentless commentary. Julian continued his charade, appearing at her desk, finding excuses to linger. But every time he leaned close, she felt herself pulling away. Every time he touched her hand, Jasper's voice cut through. That wasn't love. That was arrogance. Her body flinched before her mind caught up. She knew Julian noticed. His gaze sharpened, his charm doubling down. But the more he pressed, the less she could breathe. Friday night, Rose finally cracked. Julian had insisted on walking her to her car, his hand resting at the small of her back, his voice warm, persuasive. But when he leaned in, murmuring, "I think about you more than I should," something inside her snapped. She pulled away. "Don't." Julian froze, his expression flickering for just a second, before smoothing back into perfection. "Don't know what? Don't say things like that." Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't waver. "Not when I don't know if they mean anything." His gaze sharpened the mask, slipping almost imperceptibly. "Of course they mean something." "Do they?" she whispered. The silence that followed was too heavy, too sharp. Finally, Julian smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're tired. I'll let you rest." He stepped back, letting her go, but she felt his gaze linger long after she turned away, heavy and unreadable. That night, Rose didn't go home right away. Instead, she found herself at a quiet cafe near the river Hands, wrapped around a lukewarm cup she barely touched. Jasper arrived minutes later, as though he'd been expecting her call. He slid into the seat across from her, his presence steady. She looked up at him, her eyes weary. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." "You don't have to be strong alone," he said. Her throat ached. "What if I can't let go of him? What if some part of me always wants to believe he meant it?" Jasper leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Then let that part of you grieve. But don't let it blind you. He doesn't deserve your belief. Rose, not after what he's done." Tears welled again, spilling silently down her cheeks. "It hurts." "I know." His hand covered hers, warm, grounding. "But you're not alone in it. I'll carry what you can't." Rose let herself lean into his touch, for the first time the dam finally breaking. She wept quietly, the sound muffled by the hum of the cafe, her body trembling. And Jasper stayed, silent, solid, a presence that didn't need rehearsed lines or perfect smiles, just truth. When she finally returned home, Rose stood before her mirror, exhausted and raw. The woman staring back looked older, worn, but her eyes, though rimmed with red, held something new. Not certainty, not yet, but resolve. For the first time, she wasn't just a woman caught in Julian's spotlight. She was beginning to see behind it someone who might step out of his carefully constructed theater and reclaim her own stage. And somewhere in that fragile resolve, a seed of vengeance quietly took root. The following Monday, Rose walked into Harrison and Cole, wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was deliberate. The woman who had wept into her pillow last week was still inside her, somewhere bruised and raw, but no one at the office needed to see that version. Not Julian, not Aurora, not anyone, especially not Julian. He was already waiting near her desk, leaning against the corner like the lobby belonged to him, which in a way it did. His suit was navy today, paired with a tie in the shade of deep wine. Handsome, polished, untouchable. "Good morning," he said warmly, holding out another coffee. Rose took it this time. She even smiled, the curve of her lips soft enough to pass for real. "Thank you." Julian studied her, his eyes narrowing just slightly, as though testing the weight of her expression. Then he grinned, satisfied. The performance continued. By mid-morning, Aurora had cornered her in the ladies' room, arms, crossed eyes sparkling with curiosity. "You're glowing again," Aurora declared. "Either you had a fantastic weekend or—" She let the sentence dangle like bait. Rose dabbed her lipstick in the mirror, careful not to flinch. "Or what?" Aurora smirked. "Or Mr. Harrison is working his CEO magic." Spill. Rose let out a soft laugh, one that sounded almost natural. "It's nothing, Aurora. Really." But her reflection told another story. There was a faint tremor at the corner of her smile, and the shadow lingered in her eyes. Aurora, blissfully oblivious, mistook it for nerves. "You're terrible at hiding," Aurora teased. "But don't worry, I'll keep your secret." If only she knew. That evening, Rose met Jasper at a quiet corner cafe. The place smelled of burnt espresso and fresh croissants, where conversations dissolved into background hum. He slid into the seat across her, his jacket dusting with rain. "You look calmer," he observed. "Not calm. Rose corrected. Controlled. He raised a brow. There's a difference. Yes, she said softly. Calm means peace. Controlled means I've decided which mask to wear. Jasper studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. So you're going to play along? She nodded. If I pull away too soon, he'll know. He'll spin the story. People will believe him because he's Julian Harrison. But if I let him think he's winning, if I let him keep playing his game, her voice sharpened. That's when we'll strike. Something flickered in Jasper's gaze. Admiration maybe, or fear of what this new Rose might become. Are you sure you can handle that? He asked quietly. No, she admitted. But I don't have a choice. On Wednesday, Julian invited her again this time to a sleek restaurant in Lincoln Park, all white tablecloths and quiet music. He was dazzling as always. Pulling out her chair and ordering wine with an easy confidence made servers nod like disciples. He leaned close, telling stories about his travels meetings with senators and investors, and the glittering world he lived in like it was his second skin. Rose laughed in all the right places, smiled when she should, tilted her head just so when his hand brushed hers across the table. Inside, she counted seconds. Every gesture, every compliment, every careful line of dialogue he thought she couldn't see through. At one point, he touched her wrist, his thumb stroking lightly. You make this city bearable, Rose. Without you, it would just be noise. The line might have melted her once. Tonight, it felt like reading from a script. Still, she let her lips curve into a soft smile. You always know what to say. His grin widened, triumphant. Score another point for the game. Later that night, when Julian dropped her off outside her apartment, he lingered at the curb, his car idling like a beast in the dark. Rose, he said, voice smooth. You've changed lately. Her stomach nodded, but she tilted her head innocently. Changed how? More open. Softer. His eyes gleamed. I like it. She forced a blush to her cheeks, lowering her gaze. I'm getting used to you. Satisfied, he leaned closer, brushing his lips against her cheek before retreating. Good night, Rose. The car pulled away, and Rose stood in the street lamp's glow, her pulse hammering. She wanted to scrub the touch from her skin, but pulled out her phone instead. Jasper picked up on the second ring. He thinks he's winning, Rose whispered. Good, Jasper replied. Let him. The next day, Julian's charm faltered for the first time. When Rose presented her report with quiet confidence in a meeting, one of the senior partners praised her work. The room filled with nods of approval and murmurs of agreement. Julian's smile never left his face, but Rose caught the flicker of irritation in his eyes, the subtle tightening of his jaw. It was small, almost invisible, but she saw it. At that moment, she realized something important. Julian wasn't used to sharing the spotlight. His attention to her wasn't love. It was possession. The thought sent a shiver through her. That evening, Jasper handed her a folder across their cafe table. She hesitated before opening it. Inside were screenshots, photos, and messages. Women's names, dates, details. Proof of Julian's games stacked neatly on paper. Rose's stomach churned. Every page was another wound, smiling faces of women who had probably believed the exact words she had. Promises whispered into their ears like sacred vows, discarded after the thrill. Her hands trembled as she set the folder down. How many, she asked, her voice barely audible. Enough, Jasper said quietly. And not one of them deserved it. She closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. Neither did I. When she looked at him again, there was no more denial left. Just pain, and beneath it something sharper. Resolve. As she left the cafe, rain poured in sudden sheets soaking the sidewalks. Jasper walked her to her apartment, the umbrella barely shielding them. At her door, she hesitated, looking at him. His hair was damp, his jacket dripping, but his eyes were steady on hers. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For being real." Before he could respond, she leaned forward, kissing his cheek softly. Not romantic. Not yet. But something rawer. Recognition. When she pulled back, his expression held a quiet ache and a promise. "You're not alone in this," he said. And for the first time in weeks, she almost believed it. Rose sat at her desk that night, staring at the tulip Julian had given her days ago. The petals had begun to wilt, curling inward, their beauty fading. She picked it up, twirled it once between her fingers, then dropped it into the trash. The sound was soft, final. Her reflection in the window showed a woman with shadows in her eyes, but also something new, fire. Julian thought he was still in control, but for the first time, Rose knew otherwise. She wasn't just playing the game anymore. She was rewriting it. By the time autumn settled over Chicago, the air sharp and restless Rose Carter had learned to smile on command. It was an art now, curving her lips just enough, softening her gaze at precisely the right moments, tilting her head like someone caught halfway between shyness and surrender. Julian ate it up. And why wouldn't he? He believed he was winning. But beneath the gloss, Rose was charting every move, every word he spoke, every glance he stole, every carefully rehearsed gesture. She was no longer his pawn. She was his shadow. And shadows, when timed right, could swallow the light whole. It didn't take long for Julian to escalate. One afternoon, he strolled into her cubicle with that disarming grin, tossing a small velvet box onto her desk. Rose blinked at it. "What's this?" "Open it," he urged. Inside lay a delicate gold bracelet, thin and gleaming with a single diamond charm. Her stomach twisted, but she let her eyes widen, feigning awe. "Julian, I can't accept this." "Yes, you can." His tone left no room for debate. "It suits you." He reached out, fastening it around her wrist, his fingers brushing her skin with proprietary ease. From the corner of her vision, Rose caught Aurora watching her jaw practically on the floor. The gossip would explode by the end of the day. Julian leaned closer, his voice low. "Wear it for me." Rose forced a blush, murmuring, "All right." But inside, bile rose in her throat. A bracelet wasn't a gift. It was a leash. That evening, she yanked the bracelet off the second she walked into the cafe. It clinked against the table as she shoved it toward Jasper. His brows lifted. "That bad, huh?" "It's not a gift," she hissed. "It's a collar. And he expects me to wag my tail." Jasper studied her, then the bracelet before pocketing it calmly. "Then we'll use it." Her eyes narrowed. "How?" A faint smile tugged at his lips. "You'll see." The following week, Julian invited her to a gala, one of those events dripping with champagne velvet gowns and the heavy scent of money. He arrived in a black suit sharp enough to cut glass at her apartment. His compliments flowed as he guided her into his car, his hand never leaving the small of her back. At the venue, Rose played her part flawlessly. She laughed at his jokes, leaned into his touch, smiled for the cameras, flashing like lightning in the ballroom. To the outside world, she was the lucky one. The ordinary woman swept into the glittering orbit of a powerful man. But Jasper was there too, hidden in plain sight, mingling with contacts, quietly collecting whispers. His gaze once found hers across the room, a fleeting anchor in the chaos. Julian didn't notice, or maybe he didn't care. He was too busy basking in the performance, the admiration of his peers, as they glanced at Rose with thinly veiled envy. "She looks perfect on your arm," one man murmured. Julian smirked. Doesn't she? Rose's smile never faltered. But inside, she carved those words into stone. Perfect on your arm. Like an accessory. Like the bracelet. 2 days later, an anonymous article appeared online. It wasn't explosive yet. Just a whisper in digital ink rumors about Julian Harrison's history with women, vague references to games and bets. The kind of gossip people half dismissed but couldn't resist clicking anyway. Julian stormed into the office that morning, his composure cracking at the edges. "Who's feeding this garbage?" he growled to his assistant. Rose watched from her desk, sipping her coffee. Expression serene. His smile returned when he approached her later, but his eyes betrayed him. "Ignore what you've heard. People envy what they can't have." Rose tilted her head innocently. "What have I heard?" Julian studied her, searching for cracks. But her mask held. Inside, she felt a flicker of triumph. The first crack had appeared. That evening, she met Jasper in his car, parked along a quiet stretch near the river. He handed her a tablet, the article glowing on the screen. "Just the beginning," he said. "More will come. But we have to be careful. He'll start looking for enemies now." Rose's hands trembled slightly as she set the tablet down. "What if he finds out it's us?" "Then we'll already be too far ahead," Jasper assured. His voice was steady, grounding. "We're not just exposing him, Rose. We're dismantling the stage he built." She turned to him, her throat tight. "Why do you keep risking yourself?" Jasper's gaze lingered on her face. His voice softer now, "Because you're worth more than being someone's bet." Her chest ached at its simplicity. No rehearsed line, no grand gesture, just truth. Over the next week, Julian grew more possessive. He appeared at her desk more often, insisted on driving her home, and flooded her with texts that veered between charm and subtle demand. "You're mine, Rose," he whispered once at the end of a meeting, his hand gripping her waist. "Don't forget that." Her blood ran cold, but she smiled at him, her voice sweet. "How could I?" Behind her eyes, she burned. One night, walking home alone, Rose felt the city pressing too close. Every sound, the crunch of footsteps, the hum of a passing car, felt sharper, heavier. When Jasper appeared beside her on the sidewalk, she nearly cried with relief. "You shouldn't walk alone right now," he said. She exhaled shakily. "I'm not scared of the city. I'm afraid of him." Jasper's expression hardened. "Then we'll make him the scared one." By the end of the month, the whispers about Julian had grown louder. More articles, anonymous social media posts, screenshots surfacing of private messages, flirtations, innuendo, the beginnings of his many conquests. In the office, the air shifted. Colleagues still smiled at him, but the glances lingered a little longer, curiosity sharper in their eyes. Doubt had begun to spread like ink in water. Julian noticed. His grip on Rose tightened, his gaze often sharper now, as though testing her loyalty. But Rose had learned to smile without breaking. She leaned into his touch in public, laughed when expected, and even kissed his cheek when cameras were near. All the while, she carried Jasper's quiet words with her. "We're dismantling the stage," and for the first time she believed it. Back in her apartment, Rose stood at the window overlooking the city one night. Lights blinked in the distance, the river cutting through steel and glass like a vein of silver. She pressed her palm against the cold glass, whispering to her reflection, "Not much longer." The bracelet Julian had given her sat on the table behind her, glinting under the lamplight. A symbol of control. A symbol of everything she would destroy. Soon the leash would become evidence. And when it did, Julian Harrison would learn what losing felt like. The city was buzzing, not with music or traffic, but with whispers. Every corner of Harrison and Cole seemed alive with speculation screens glowing with headlines they pretended not to read. The name Julian Harrison was everywhere: blogs, social feeds, even a local paper headline tucked into the hands of a vendor on Michigan Avenue. Words like womanizer bets and toxic games clung to his name. Now, no matter how many PR statements he issued. And in the center of it all, Rose sat at her desk typing quietly, as though the world hadn't tilted beneath her feet. By midday, the glass doors to Julian's office slammed hard enough to rattle. He emerged like a storm in a suit, his smile sharp, but his eyes bloodshot. Rose. He called, his voice too smooth for the tension in his jaw. The office went silent. Dozens of eyes followed her as she rose slowly and followed him into his office. Inside, the door clicked shut. Silence thickened, the only sound the ticking of a sleek silver clock on the wall. Julian turned, his smile gone. "You've seen the articles." Rose clasped her hands in front of her, steadying her breath. "Everyone has." He stepped closer, his eyes piercing. "Lies. All of them. You know that, don't you?" Her chest tightened, but she forced her voice to be soft. "Of course." Something in him eased, but not fully. He searched her face, peeling away skin to find her thoughts. Then he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You're not like them," he murmured. "You know me better than that." Rose smiled faintly, though it felt like glass in her mouth. "I do." Inside, she burned. Later, Aurora cornered her by the copy machine, her usual sparkle muted. "Rose, you've heard right. About the women." Rose kept her expression carefully neutral. "Everyone's talking." Aurora bit her lip, lowering her voice. "Do you believe it?" Rose hesitated, the silence stretching. Then she whispered, "Do you?" Aurora glanced around, then sighed. "I don't want to. But some of the screenshots, Rose, they look real." Rose nodded slowly, as though reluctantly agreeing. "Maybe people want to believe the worst." Aurora studied her carefully. "Or the worst is true." For once, Aurora's eyes didn't glitter with gossip. They were clouded with worry. Rose turned away before her mask cracked. That evening, Rose slipped into Jasper's car, her body tense. Rain streaked down the windshield. The city outside blurred and wet. "He's unraveling," she whispered. Jasper nodded grimly. "That's what happens when control starts slipping. Men like Julian don't know how to live without it." She glanced at him, her voice barely audible. "He looked at me today like he was testing me, like he wanted to know if I'd betray him." "And what did you do?" "I smiled," she said bitterly. "Like always." Jasper's hand tightened on the steering wheel. "Be careful. The more desperate he gets, the more dangerous he'll become." Her throat ached. "Can I keep this up? If I can keep pretending." Jasper turned to her, his eyes steady. "You don't have to pretend with me." The words nearly undid her. She let her head fall back against the seat for a moment, eyes closing, the exhaustion of deception pressing heavily. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered. "You won't have to find out," Jasper replied softly. 2 days later, Julian's mask cracked in public. They were leaving a client meeting when paparazzi appeared outside, cameras flashing like a storm. Julian tightened his grip on Rose's hand, pulling her close. "Smile," he muttered through clenched teeth. She obeyed the cameras, capturing a couple united against the noise. But his hand squeezed harder, almost painfully, a silent command. "Don't look away." He hissed, his smile sharp for the cameras. When they finally slipped into his car, the mask dropped. "Do you see what they're doing? They're trying to ruin me. Us." Rose swallowed hard. Julian. Don't Julian me. He snapped, his voice low and dangerous. You're mine, Rose. They can write whatever they want, but you'll stand by me. Won't you? Her heart pounded, but she forced her voice steady. Of course. Only then did his grip ease, his smile returning like a bad rehearsal. Good girl. Rose turned her face toward the window, hiding the tears threatening to fall. That night, another article dropped, stronger this time. Screenshots paired with dates, places, and names of women ready to speak. The whispers solidified into something heavier. The bracelet Julian had given her was mentioned explicitly. One woman claimed she'd been given the same. Rose stared at the screen, her stomach churning. She touched her bare wrist, remembering how she'd dropped it on Jasper's table. Evidence. Jasper's doing. Her phone buzzed, Julian's name flashing. She let it ring, then ring again, and again. Finally, she answered, her voice calm. Hello. Rose's voice came fast, urgent. Don't believe what you're seeing. They're coming after me because I'm powerful. You understand that? Rose bit her lip until it nearly bled. I understand. But this time she didn't smile. The next evening, Rose and Jasper sat in the cafe, the evidence folder thicker now. Rose flipped through pages, her fingers trembling. How many women, she whispered. Too many, Jasper said quietly. Her throat closed. Why didn't I see it sooner? Because you wanted to believe in love, he replied. There's no shame in that. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. And what about you, Jasper? What do you believe in? For a moment he held her gaze, something raw flickering there. Then he said softly, I believe in you. Her breath caught. The words lingered, fragile and dangerous, hanging between them. She wanted to reach across the table to let herself fall into the truth of it. But the weight of Julian's shadow still loomed too large. So she closed the folder instead, her voice steady. Then let's finish this. By Friday, Julian was a man possessed. He stormed through the office, barking orders, calling emergency meetings, snapping at anyone who hesitated too long. But when he looked at Rose, his voice softened, his hands gentler. To the outside world, it looked like devotion. To her, it felt like chains tightening. At lunch, he leaned across the table in the cafeteria, his smile taut. We'll get through this. Together. Rose nodded, her fork untouched. Of course. But when she glanced up, she caught Aurora staring at her, suspicion in her eyes now. Aurora wasn't buying the fairy tale anymore, and that terrified Rose more than she cared to admit. Rose stood in her apartment that night, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. The city lights blinked like restless eyes behind her. She whispered to herself, he's falling apart. Behind her on the table lay the folder Jasper had built, thicker now, heavier proof layered upon proof. And a spark burned brighter somewhere deep inside her, between the fear and the exhaustion. Not much longer. Julian Harrison was slipping, and when he finally fell, she would be ready. The city woke restless. News vans cluttered outside Harrison and Cole's glass tower, their antennas stabbing at the gray morning sky. Reporters huddled with cameras and microphones, hungry for sound bites. Inside, employees whispered in corners, their eyes darting toward Julian's office like children waiting for thunder. And Rose Carter walked in with her head high. Her pulse pounded, but her stride didn't falter. She had spent too long bent beneath the weight of deception. Today, she would not bend. The folder Jasper had built over weeks throbbed like a heartbeat in her bag. Screenshots, testimonies, and the recording that had haunted her since the beginning. Even the bracelet gleaming like a chain in a velvet lining. Jasper had arranged everything. The press was primed, the authorities tipped off. All Rose had to do was stand steady when the storm broke. She found Jasper waiting in the lobby, his presence solid as ever. His eyes met hers, steady grounding. "You ready?" he asked. Rose swallowed hard. "No, but I'm here." His lips curved in that quiet half-smile she'd come to know. That's enough. By mid-morning, Julian stormed into the conference room, his suit immaculate, but his composure fraying at the seams. The room hushed instantly. He slammed his hands on the table, his voice sharp. "These lies end now. I will not have my name dragged through the mud by jealous cowards." He turned his eyes, locking on Rose. "And I will not have the woman I care about poisoned against me." Dozens of heads swiveled. The weight of his declaration landed like a blow. Rose forced her voice steady. "Julian, don't." He strode closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You're mine, Rose. You know that." Her chest tightened, but not with fear anymore, with fury. "No," she said softly. "I'm not." The door opened. Two officers stepped in crisp uniforms, cutting through the tension. Gasps rippled around the room. "Julian Harrison," one officer said firmly. "You're under arrest. Charges include fraud, harassment, and coercion." Julian froze, his jaw tightening. "This is absurd. Do you know who I am?" "Yes," the officer replied evenly. "That's why we're here." Chaos erupted, employees whispering phones, snapping photos, Aurora clapping a hand over her mouth. Julian's gaze darted wildly, finally landing on Rose. His voice cracked desperation bleeding through the arrogance. "You did this." Rose met his eyes steady now. "No, Julian, you did this to yourself." As the officers cuffed him, Julian struggled, his voice booming. "This isn't over. You'll regret this, all of you." But the words sounded smaller than ever. Hollow. Rose stood frozen, her hands trembling at her sides. Then she felt Jasper step closer, his voice low only for her. "It's over." For the first time, she believed him. The office buzzed for hours after employees replaying the scene, gossiping in frantic tones. Aurora pulled Rose aside, her eyes wide with awe. "Girl, you just toppled a king." Rose shook her head. "No, he toppled himself. I just stopped pretending he couldn't fall." Aurora hugged her tight, whispering, "I'm proud of you." For once, Rose didn't argue. Rose sat with Jasper at the same cafe where everything had begun that evening. The city outside glowed softer now, the storm of cameras and headlines raging far away. She looked at him across the table, her heart steady for the first time in weeks. "You never asked me for anything," she said. "Not proof, not trust, not even this." "This," he echoed gently. Her lips curved, fragile, but real, the truth. She reached across the table, sliding her hand into his. His grip tightened, warm, grounding. "I don't know if I can ever erase what he did to me," Rose admitted. "But I know I don't want to walk forward without you." Jasper's eyes softened, his voice low. "Then don't." And for the first time, the future didn't feel like a storm. It felt like sunrise. The suburban morning was quiet. Children's laughter echoed from the backyard, a small girl chasing bubbles across the grass. Rose stirred pancake batter inside the kitchen, while Jasper kissed her temple, stealing strawberries from the counter. "Still cheating," she teased, swatting his hand away. "Still worth it," he replied, grinning. Their daughter ran in, hair wild, cheeks flushed. "Mommy, Daddy," Play Rose and Jasper exchanged a glance, the kind that carried years of storms and sunlight, both, and followed her outside. And as Rose watched her little family laughter spilling in the golden morning, she whispered to herself, never again would she be someone's game. If you have followed Rose from her weak moments until she stood up firm, You must have seen that true love is not about flowery words or flashy things, but sincerity, perseverance, and the courage to choose the right thing. If you want to read more dramatic love stories with many unexpected twists and emotional endings, subscribe to the channel. Follow the page today. Every week, a new journey, a new love, a new shock is waiting for you. And who knows, you will find a part of yourself in the following story.